Up next, Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission sit at the dais. A city planner sits at the staff desk.
Call this meeting of the City of Ames Planning and Zoning Commission to order. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an independent advisory body of the City of Ames City Council. The Planning and Zoning Commission members are volunteers of the community and not part of the city administration. The Planning and Zoning Commission is supported by staff from the city's planning division. The commission is responsible for recommendations on matters involving subdivisions, annexations, master plans, and major site development plans, amendments to the zoning ordinance, and comprehensive plan amendments. We make our recommendations based on city codes, the facts presented, and input from the public. As an advisory commission, we welcome all comments regarding the proposed item. Please direct your input to the commission. If the proceedings become lengthy, we may ask that comments be focused on new information not previously presented. You may speak only once on an agenda item. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker information card and present it to the recording secretary. We ask that you come to the microphone to speak so that all comments may be recorded. The order of the proceeding for each item on the agenda will be as follows. City staff will present the staff report regarding the agenda item. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of city staff. The applicant will be invited to make a statement regarding the request. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions. Once public comment is closed, city staff and the applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. The commission will discuss the application based on all presentations and any comments given and come to a recommendation for city council. The discussion may include further questions of city staff and the applicant for clarification. And with that, we'll move to the first item on the agenda, which is introduction of commission members. I'm going to start on the left here. Jim.
Jim Blickensdorf.
Kyle Hosworth.
Mike Sullivan.
Matthew Voss.
Cheryl Moss.
Scott Huffman.
All right, and we'll move to the next item, which is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Move on to approval of the minutes of March 4th, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the minutes of March 4th, 2026, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. And now we'll go to election of officers. So it's the chair and the vice chair, I think is what it is. I think generally what we do is we take, if someone wants to make a motion we'll start with chair. We'll see that vote. Then we'll elect the vice chair. I forget, does that person take over, or is it the next meeting that it takes effect?
After the vote, the chair would take over the operating of the meeting.
Yep. Okay. All right. So I know we got some new people here, but do we have a motion for chair, or nomination for chair?
Point of order, Mike, are you allowed to be chair again, or have you any interest in doing so?
I don't think there's anything that would preclude someone from being chair again. I would not be opposed. Anyone else? I don't have a strong interest in doing it, but I will gladly do it. But yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any desire to do so?
I'll nominate Mike Sullivan.
And I would move to cease nominations and accept Mike Sullivan via acclamation.
I'll be honest, I don't know what that means.
We have to vote.
Yeah,
We'll do a vote.
That's a second.
Okay. I guess open it up for discussion. Is there any discussion before or I guess if someone wants to second that motion?
Second. Or wait, I motion.
think someone has to-
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Do we wish to have any discussion on the chair? Okay. All in favor of Mike Sullivan as chair for the next term, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Motion passes. I'll be serving as chair, which makes it easy for continuing the meeting. I'll now take nominations for vice chair. Does anyone have a nomination for vice chair?
Did the previous vice chair roll off the commission, or are they?
I'm
Matthew Voss.
yeah. I'm willing to do it again. No one else.
I nominate Matthew Ross.
I second.
All right. Do we have any discussion about that nomination? All right. All in favor of Matthew Voss for vice chair, say aye. All opposed? Motion passes. So those officers will remain the same. Great. All right. Now we'll move on to public forum. This is if any member of the audience wishes to come up and speak about an agenda item or an item that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity to do so. So would anyone like to come up and speak for public forum? All right. Seeing none, we will close the public forum and we'll move on.
Excuse me, so there will be discussion on the plan?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yep. So now we'll move on to that item 7 on the agenda, which is preliminary plat for Auburn Trail at 4605 and 4514 Hyde Avenue.
Good evening. I'm Amelia Schoeneman. I'm one of the planners for the City of Ames, and I'll be presenting this request. So as you said, this is the Auburn Trail proposed subdivision. It's on the north side of the city, on both the west and the east sides of Hyde, north of Bloomington Heights, and it's within the Ada Hayden watershed. And some of you on the commission probably recall we recently saw a rezoning for this property that included a master plan, which I'm showing on the screen. The master plan lays out kind of a base to work from for a preliminary plat. So it lays out what areas are to be protected open space versus development areas, road connections, shared use paths, density ranges, and a number of units. And so staff has reviewed the proposed plat and found it does conform with the master plan. I'll show you the overall layout of the plat. So there are 178 lots. Just to zoom in there. There is one lot on the east side of Hyde. All others are on the west side. The main access will be, the lots won't take individual access off of Hyde. So there will be one main collector street that runs through the subdivision. It is Tilden Parkway. It's in the north center portion of the site, and it will connect up to the north to this property, which will be a future development. Sometimes we refer to it as Rose Prairie, if you're familiar. But there will also be street connections to the south with Welbeck and Crestmore. And then we've also asked for a future stub street connection right here on the north property line. It's labeled as an outlot right now that provides access to a cell tower, but also a future connection to the north, an additional connection to the north. One note on the streets, pedestrian walkways between blocks are required when you exceed a certain block length, so 660 feet. Between Tilden and Glacier on the west side of Rainier, you can see there is a mid-block crossing. On this western side, though, you can see there isn't one. And so the length of Tilden and Glacier from these intersections is over 660 feet. So they've asked for alternative design approval based on kind of the configuration of the open spaces in that area. So you can see Outlot D to the north tapers. They're close to an area, Outlot B, that will be dedicated as a park. And there is some additional sidewalk and access points that lead to that park. That's the basis of the request. On the topic of the outlots and the parks, so there are 10 what we call outlots on the site. So they're not for development. They're reserved from development. They're mostly for stormwater features, or they might have a path, a trail, some sort of recreational element in them. They are exceeding the required minimum 10% usable open space on the site. And the recreation space over here where my cursor is on Outlot B, where you can see there's a sidewalk from both Glacier and from Crestmore, Kind of a half acre in this area will be reserved as a park space. It's more of a pocket park. So a smaller park, but with some recreational elements. And we will have as part of the final plat. So when this comes back to you with a future phase, we'll see what they are proposing in terms of a play structure, picnic tables, those kinds of elements will be approved with that final plat. I also wanted to touch on the fact that this is in the Ada Hayden watershed. So we have higher standards for conservation, design, and low impact development subdivisions in this area. I think mainly that's for stormwater. So typically in a subdivision, we have our minimum City of Ames municipal code requirements for stormwater management. In this area, we require additional practices for stormwater that are put in a series. So stormwater reaches one practice before it filters into a second practice before it, outfalls. And so that helps with additional pollution, sediment control in this area. And so they are demonstrating that. On the north side of the site, I will note that these lots go to an infiltration trench, which is a type of stormwater practice. And before we take this plat to City Council, we're just waiting on a few more calculations as part of the stormwater management plan to show that the requirements are met. We've been working with the applicant and they've assured us that they are. We just are waiting on some of the numbers. So we'll get those before City Council. And similarly, on the south side of the site, you can see there is an outlot here that's about 50 feet in width. This will provide some stormwater conveyance over to the main pond. And we're just also looking for some additional information on, because it's open, it's a swale, just the height in a larger storm event of water, given its proximity to some of the lots in the subdivision. But they won't be, having additional water flow to the south. It'll all flow to the east, to those ponds, to the existing homes to the south. Shouldn't be impacted by the stormwater flows in that area. They'll also be submitting an erosion control plan for during construction. And with the conservation design subdivision, there is a landscaping plan. It was included in your packet, and it includes native species for the ground cover. So looking at more prairie plants and grasses, as well as a street tree plan that includes native species and clustered trees. So not spaced equidistant, but in a more natural clustered way. And so those will have final approval with the final plat, as well as the conservation management plan that'll show us how they're going to manage these native species and since there are, more open space areas than you'd see in a typical subdivision, how they're going to manage those open space areas as well. So with that, we are recommending approval with conditions. As we discussed, there's a few items to be addressed before council, and then just reiterating what needs to be addressed before the final plat. So for instance, the pocket park improvements that'll come back to you. So I'm happy to take any questions.
So I have a few, sorry. So looking at the pocket park and the documentation, it says that it's going to be private, taking inspiration from another private park in the Somerset area, which to my knowledge has been kept up very nice, maintained. Mm-hmm. What recourse does the city have if for some reason this park isn't upkept? Is there any thought or concern about that?
It will eventually be turned over to the homeowners association to maintain. And I probably have information in the conservation management plan as well on maintenance. Do we have any?
I'm not familiar with any of these private amenities that exist with any penalty for an HOA deciding it's aged out and not replacing it. So I don't think we have any experience with having to go after anyone to do that. So I don't know that there is anything specific that we would do.
Okay.
It has not come up as an issue yet.
Sure. And then my second question is looking at the traffic. It says again in the documentation that the traffic light that is scheduled for Bloomington and Hyde was supposed to be a shared cost with the developer, but due to incentives that was removed. What would be the anticipated timeline for that signal then? And would the city just be covering that cost in the long term?
So the city uses a capital improvement program to prioritize improvements across the city. It would have to go into the traffic signal plan, which is not something that's a condition of this project.
Okay.
It'll get evaluated along with other needed facilities across the city. So
Okay.
the payment by the developer would not have been enough alone to pay for a signal. So if they did pay that, it didn't mean that the signal is being built next year.
Sure.
So it doesn't change the timing.
Okay.
It is fully the cost of the city with the incentives now, instead of waiting for, there's another party, the Hayden's Preserve party to the north has the same thing of a traffic impact fee to be collected. The city's been waiting for years to collect those. With the incentives, that goes away. So then the city would look at funding it 100% themselves, and they'll look at programming it now instead of waiting for the funding.
Okay, thank you.
I think the questions I had were about stormwater. I think you answered some of the ones I had. I think one question I had was talk about sediment forebays. Will those be, I guess, who will be responsible for maintaining those and cleaning those out? Is that the city? Is that on the homeowners association, or who does that fall to?
So the detention basins typically get turned over to the city for long-term maintenance. These practices are right before the detention basins.
Yep.
I'd say that it's likely the HOA's responsibility to do what we would call annual maintenance. Doesn't mean that the city wouldn't step into a forebay to help assist in that if that was critically needed. But that's what the conservation management plan is going to say. This is what must be done on this type of schedule for these things to work. So the HOA has a plan for what to do and isn't just, oh, we haven't done anything for 5 years. Do we need to do something? So that's the intent. Public Works will work through that with that final conservation plan on exactly what those expectations are.
Okay. Yeah, and then I think the comments about the infiltration trench on the north side, I think that'll be an important thing to get right and make sure, it sounds like a lot of thought and considerations going into that, which will be important for the Ada Hayden watershed water quality. And then I guess the ponds and the outlets F and G, those discharge to Ada Hayden as well, right?
So they're in series. So outlet F discharges to G, but then
Okay.
yes, G discharges to, there's a small stream to the south that the city just actually did stabilization work on. So that will discharge to that stream that does eventually make it into
Okay.
Ada Hayden. Yes.
Yeah.
Could
No.
you repeat that? I couldn't hear that.
Yes. So the question was, where
Can you
did
bring up the grading plan?
Yeah, that-
I think the grading plan helps show things a little differently.
So this is the grading plan with the lot showing those ponds. So you can see there's a outlet, a sewer from Pond A to across Hyde to Pond B. And then Pond B does outlet to the south where this stream is located. And that stream does make its way to Ada Hayden.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, the treatment train approach, the low impact development, I think these are all really good things. And I just wanted to highlight those and ask a few questions. But that all sounds really good. So thank you.
In terms of some of the shared use paths, trails, I know some of the developments up in North Ames have paths between the backyards of properties, and here the outlots have a fair amount of space there. I guess what are what's planned for connections, and I don't think like Outlet F had any connections sort of through there. Is that because of grading or?
So the main trail, there's two main trails. One will be up Hyde, in the Hyde right of way on the west side of the road. So this is a city project. It will connect to, let me get the overall plan back up here. It will connect to the path that runs along the south side of Tilden. But there will also be a southern connection with a sidewalk. I think that might be what you're asking about on Outlot F. So between lots 31 and 32, you can see there's a sidewalk that runs out to the shared use path in the right of way along Hyde. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. Initially I was thinking more about like the northern part of Outlet F between like say 101 and 63, like sort of the backyards of those properties.
Sure. No, there's no connection shown there. There's a sidewalk along Rainier Way. And there is, a connection to the north there, on the north side between lots 140, 141, 118, and 117. That would, get you to the shared use path on the south side of the street. But no, there is not a connection here.
And the shared use path on the south side of Tilden, that's a full width.
It's 8 feet, yes.
So I think so kind of in the trails, the conservation ordinance does talk about linking conservation areas together, both visually and with trails and paths when possible. I think we did spend quite a bit of time looking at that particular thing to look at that. Eventually, I think staff believed the complications of the drainage system through there basically made it probably too difficult or maybe just a little bit too hard to make a reasonable walkway through there with the slope and the stormwater facility. So what Amelia just brought up, so you can see what's actually in that outlot. There is a pipe that goes through it underground, but then it hits that forebay again before it gets into that main channel. And the slope there was significant. So without kind of altering the slope and having to address more of a winding kind of path system, we agreed it wasn't absolutely necessary to go through that location.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that's the low impact development conservation ordinance. I think that's the yin and the yang there. You're trying to create these open spaces and make them accessible, but they're also having a very functional purpose. And sometimes they don't go together. So what's the priority? And that's how we kind of looked at all of these things with the applicant, is how do we prioritize, or how do we accomplish both as much as possible? And when is it absolutely critical to accomplish one over the other? And I guess that's where we landed on. Where you don't see paths is where we agreed it was more difficult to do than just to put a sidewalk down.
Any other questions for city staff at this time?
I think just to clarify, I think I see it on there, but on sheet 13, kind of, so that'll have your swale kind of at the south of the property. Am I reading that right? You got a storm sewer that gets under that sidewalk that goes to the south. That sidewalk's not going down through the grade. Is that correct? Be right there. Looks like there's a little orange line there, but am I
Right
down?
here?
Take your cursor down a little bit to the sidewalk. Right there. Am I reading that right? That's our storm sewer getting under that sidewalk.
Yes.
So the sidewalk will be elevated, but in a heavy storm event, that sidewalk's not going to get flooded over. Correct?
That's a good question.
I think that's one of the areas we're still working on the grading plan
Yes.
with for final elevations.
Yep. So as you can see in the red, they've provided the 100-year storm elevation
Yeah.
around the pond, but we don't have it yet for that
Mhm.
southern area.
Yeah.
So that's kind of pending, a detail that's pending.
It looks like they got an orange line there for their storm sewer. So I
Yes,
assume
there-
that's their plan, but
there
maybe
is a
just
storm
verify when they get it
Yeah.
in that's how it's getting under
I
the
think what we're
sidewalk. there.
hesitating to say is, even though there's a pipe there to convey water,
We're not
that
totally sure
doesn't
that
mean
it
will not ever
Still flow
overflow.
over.
Right.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
where I think we're pausing.
Yep.
It's intended to be dry. but that doesn't mean it always.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think just to kind of illustrate that point, so here that we did push that this needed to be done for the connectivity expectations of the subdivision code with this loop street and then the disconnect from getting to anywhere else. So we said we really need to see a connection get from this loop street back out to Hyde. So that's where they had to really work to try to make that happen versus the Tilden crossing could go either way. And we said we would go with the stormwater treatment.
Mhm.
Any other questions for city staff at this time?
I wanted to highlight one thing that we didn't touch on. If you go back to the Tilden design, this is something, again, I'm kind of stepping in here just to explain some things that you don't normally see, and you may not have any questions, but I just feel like it's not a normal thing to see, so I want to explain it. So Tilden is a little different approach from how we have done streets recently. So Tilden is a somewhat higher order street. It's called a residential collector. So it is a 31-foot wide section. Because it does have that through connection to the north, it's the main spine road for all of this area that runs in parallel to Hyde. So originally in this area, when we saw the first version of this development, we thought the spine road needed to really discourage lots and to really just facilitate traffic through the area. And one of the issues was speed control. So we worked to this design, and we're installing 2 mini roundabouts, which will be the first 2 installed in a residential subdivision in the city. So on this street, we're trying to incorporate speed control up front, and that was kind of a compromise to allow for more driveways and lots on that area to do that. So those are the first 2 you see. These are not Cottonwood, University Boulevard size roundabouts. This is not what they are. These are speed deterrents for the most part. So you will have to slow down to go around a little bit, kind of deflect around that. And they do meet fire code. Fire trucks can mount them and go straight through them. It's not an issue for fire response. So just wanted to point that out. You may see that again upcoming. This is a product of trying to address our complete streets ideals and our pedestrian and bicycle master plan about how do we improve facilities and make them more pedestrian friendly. But also in this case, it does help justify the developer having quite a few lots on this residential collector street, which in the past we've tried to minimize for safety and speed reasons. So that's something you don't normally see. Just wanted to point that out because it is something that you may see again in the future.
Kind of on that subject, what would be the intent for street parking on Tilden, if any, as well as obviously the neighborhood streets in there too?
Yep. So I didn't include the exhibit for the parking plan. But let me.
So for the standard local streets, which are 26 feet wide, it's one side only. We typically do that on the side opposite of the water main where the fire hydrants are. That's just our practice. Tilden also has, it's not two-sided, is it?
No.
It's one-sided as well. So it follows that same path. So each
Yep.
street does have on-street parking to the extent that they can fit into those areas.
Yep. So parking on the south sides generally, or the west sides.
If you're thinking, when do you get 2 sides of parking, it's a 37-foot wide street. So it's an extra 6 feet if you need double parking on a street.
All right.
I think
Well, then at this point, we'll invite the applicant to come up and make a statement regarding their request if they'd like to.
Good evening, Justin Dodge, Hunziker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Certainly appreciate you guys taking this up. Appreciate Amelia and Kelly's work. This has been many years in the process. I don't know if any of you were behind the dais when we brought it up a few years ago, the last time we were looking at a preliminary plat, but we've got a viable solution and happy to be moving forward with it and happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. And I'll be here for any neighborhood or any public questions as well.
Any questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Mike, I think you're the only one that might have been here.
Oh,
Do you think? you
Yeah,
saw this
that
in
might
the-
be true.
The first rezoning?
I do remember it. I think maybe I was the only one nodding. Yeah,
I'm just looking around, the faces look much different than 5 years ago.
yeah, that's true. All right. Okay. So at this point, we'll offer an opportunity for members of the audience. If anyone from the audience would like to come up and speak for public comment on this agenda item, we invite you to do so at this time and come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and feel free to speak on this item.
Oh, I will. Who do I,
Oh, I can take it. It is that microphone right there.
yeah, but do you need that? I have a lot of questions, probably more than,
Well, so and I just want to say, so the public comments for an opportunity to make statement on this agenda item. We're not going to engage in a back and forth
Okay.
on it. So, but yeah.
I'm Diane McCauley. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association for the Bloomington Courtyard Homes, which is this one right here. That across from the east side of.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second just for closed captioning purposes. I just want to we're
Say it
supposed
for
to
Mike.
kind of comment so the television broadcast knows what's happening. I just want to say the speaker motion to the townhomes on the east side of
Yeah.
Hyde, just, you know.
Okay,
We're
sorry.
We're trying to improve our
Good.
closed
Yeah.
captioning ability.
Okay, got it.
Thank you,
You
Kevin.
didn't know that.
I didn't. I know that there was I did look at see the previous plat a number of years ago, and that one included a pedestrian path to Ada Hayden. And I do not see that on this one. Is that correct? That is a huge concern for me because that means all of this traffic will be walking through our townhome association, as well as some probably traffic. And our streets are private streets. We do not want any more cars or trucks running through our townhome association. And that is going to be the closest way to get to Ada Hayden. And that is the way that everybody will go. They are not going to walk up to Harrison if they can cut through our townhome association and go to Ada Hayden. So that is probably the biggest concern I have heard from our residents, particularly when it was in the previous plan. So that means a whole lot of more dog barking, a whole lot of more disruption. And I don't think that's reasonable to put us at that disadvantage because I cannot see another way that people will go. There is a path. The sidewalks go behind our townhomes. You go through the next set of townhomes and there is a path down to the sidewalk to Ada Hayden. So that is definitely the closest location. And I don't think that that is fair for our association to take on that much additional traffic unless there is a plan for a path in the future by the city or the developer. I'm also have a big concern about the amount of open space that, if I understood you correct, Kelly, that you indicated that this would probably all be homeowner association responsibility. I am particularly concerned about the east side of Hyde because they're not going to care about that. That's in our backyard. We do. Right now, it is, since Hunsaker has taken over, there's a whole bunch of scrub cedar trees growing up in there. It looks kind of bad. We, as a homeowners association, had to hire a landscaping company to come kill the thistles in our townhome because it was invaded with 1,000 thistles when they regraded that creek. Anytime they disturb the ground, there's a weed issue. And we have had a terrible weed issue because of that situation. So I am terribly concerned about that much property being turned over to a homeowners association when they aren't going to see it. They don't care. And I don't know how you can as a homeowner association board member, I'm not sure how you can make them care. I also got a lot of concerns about the traffic on Hyde. Just from our experience, when drivers come up Hyde and they get to this, what looks like an open field on the east side of Hyde, they hit the accelerator and they go very fast. And Hyde to the south really is not wide enough to accommodate a whole lot much more traffic. It already has parking on one side, and usually if you're going down Hyde and there's a pickup or a van coming towards you, you have to stop behind the parked car. Or at least most people do. They maybe wouldn't have to, but they don't feel comfortable getting that close to other traffic. I had a lot of comments from our townhome association. They wanted to see the traffic study. They wanted to know what the speed limit was going to be, what kind of noise mitigation was going to be done. I'm not going to get into all of that stuff. But there was a concern about the retention ponds. I don't know how retention ponds work. I'm not a drainage, and I don't think anybody does. But I know that creek was recently redredged, and it was a whole public works project. Was that done, I assume, with enough capacity to handle this particular stormwater? There was concern about retention ponds. Is there a problem with mosquito control at those? Or how does that happen? Because there'll be a lot of water near our place. That was one of the concerns. Who maintains those? I assume, again, that's the homeowners association, but I'm really concerned about the amount of open space that will affect us and having that adequately maintained. There was a comment about 100-year floodplain. Is that the standard now, Kelly?
Or wait, you got to
There was
address,
something
you have to
about
address
it.
the commission,
Yeah.
not staff. So
Okay, there
we'll
was
see what that means.
something about 100-year flood plain, and I know there's been discussion for many, many years, at least 10 years, about 100-year not being adequate with climate change. And so there was a number of people concerned about whether the amount of runoff and stuff was adequate. I know I worked at the DOT for a number of years, and it's been 6 or 7 years since I retired, and they were talking about that issue then. So I'm concerned that the city is maybe nobody's upgraded the standards, or maybe that is the standard still. But those are my main concerns. The pedestrian traffic through our townhome and how that could be mitigated. Any vehicle traffic, how that could be mitigated, because they could also go down Eisenhower Lane to get to Harrison very easily and take that shortcut. Those are our roads. The city doesn't own them. We don't want to maintain additional traffic. We'll turn them over to the city if we could. But those are my main concerns. I had a whole lot more. There's just a lot of concern about how that area around us is going to be handled. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, I don't, thank you for your statement. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Is there anyone else from the audience that wishes to speak on this agenda item for public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and offer the applicant and the city staff to provide any concluding remarks if they wish.
The commission can also ask questions of staff after the hearing is closed.
Could I ask, as far as private roads?
Just hold on. So the first step
Yeah,
procedurally
do
is
we have
whether
any-
the applicant wants to address any comments. If
Yep.
they do not, then you enclose the public hearing and we go back to the commission.
Oh,
for
okay.
discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Would the applicant like to address any comments?
You bet. There were a couple of questions made, and so I figure in between Kelly and myself, we could probably address a lot of those. To Diane's point, earlier on, we did have a trail in Outlot G leading into the park. After conversations with city staff and how now the path along Hyde Avenue will be paved all the way up to, what is that, 190th? They wanted our pedestrian traffic as well as Hayden's Preserves traffic to cross Hyde at one intersection. I believe it's closer to the Half Moon parking area. So that way they can have, the flashing lights and a safer place. So that way we have one location for pedestrians to cross into the park rather than two. And so we made that change. Let's see. I'm trying to unpack the rest of Diane's comments. As far as the drainage swale, that was a city design project. I would assume that they had designed it, I actually will be releasing less stormwater as a developed area versus a row cropped farm. And so even if they designed it to, standards with it being farmed, we'll be reducing our flows going to the stream. As far as the thistles, yes, those got out of hand. We turned that area over to the city for the project. We had, I don't know all the details of how the thistles kind of took over, but the city came in and took care of the thistles because they had disturbed this property as part of their project. So they came back in and made things right there. Let's see. I think that hit the high points, but were there any follow-up questions that anybody had? Very good.
So actually, sorry, this might be for kind of both of you, but Clara, you said that the path along Hyde is going to be done all the way up to 190th, and
Correct.
then pedestrian crossing going into the Ada Hayden Park at the parking area on Hyde there.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
you.
my understanding, and that's been our conversation with city staff.
All right. I'm sorry. Was there any other questions?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were
I
doing
figured
something to
Amelia
bring
was
up.
pulling it up for us.
Did it just shut off?
Oh, she turned it off. Yep.
I think Amelia's going to show it, but
Great.
I'm here all night.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So just want to clarify, are we done with the applicant then?
Yes. Sorry, I thought you were bringing something up in regards to what you
so
said.
you could see the circle parking lot
Oh, yep.
with relationship to the development site. So it's about a quarter mile.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So does city staff have any concluding remarks or any responses, I guess, to the comments that were provided in public
don't.
comment?
We don't respond to comments. We just respond to questions from the commission. So and
Okay.
we would normally close the public hearing at this point if you're done with the applicant and the public.
Yes. Okay. With that, we'll close the public comment and open it up for discussion from the commission, including questions of city staff and applicant if we wish.
I'll just put the bow on this one just so we all are seeing the same thing here. So the city, as part of that incentive package, is the city is now going to build this 10-foot trail from 190th down to Harrison. That's in lieu of expecting developers incrementally over many years doing that for the city. So that's going to be planned to be done in the next 2 years at this point. The thought was, yes, we would rather have one high visibility crossing at the trailhead that exists up there to the north. Our belief was, yes, Harrison provides access to the trailhead to the east with Ada Hayden. Our Parks and Rec staff was not excited. It could be accommodated, but they weren't preferring to have another point of access to the park through that outlot. So that's why it disappeared, because it created another crossing that was marginal. And then we weren't excited about that access point into the park. So the developer chose to remove it from their plan after we talked about it as staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about the management of Outlet G, the public comment, address whether that's, or talked about whether that's going to be managed by the HOA. But I think it was mentioned earlier that the pond at least is going to be maintained by the city. Is that
Long.
Let's clarify that. So
Yeah.
the HOA is responsible for all outlot maintenance. The city has no responsibility for that. Within our stormwater management requirements of the city, we do long-term maintenance of detention ponds. We do not do annual maintenance. So you would not see city staff out at these facilities on any regular basis. They would be, I don't even know what it would be, probably at least a 5-year or longer period of time before some kind of higher order maintenance is needed. And the thought process there is they are part of the city's storm drainage system. So we do want the system to operate appropriately. That means it's the big ticket, larger picture issues that are kind of beyond scope of an HOA, but the regular maintenance is always an HOA responsibility. And so they're both going to be wet ponds. We have wet ponds in multiple locations within the city. So if anybody's unfamiliar with those, we can go look in any modern subdivision and see how they're maintained by HOAs. You can see how they're address the water quality, nuisance abatement issues. Those are things that every HOA in the city is dealing with as part of a stormwater pond management system. So essentially since 2005, subdivisions have had to have some element of a stormwater management plan, which doesn't require wet ponds, but is not uncommon to result in wet detention ponds being part of the design.
And you mentioned nuisance abatement there. I mean, that would include generally keeping the HOA generally keeping the site maintained.
I mean, they'd be subject to the same public nuisances ordinances as anybody else in the city.
And I'll add, there will be a low grow native grass mix planted on that outlot. And that they will have a conservation management plan that prescribes, certain practices that need to be taken to maintain that. So they'll have a guide on what's necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or discussion? Okay. Does anyone wish to make a motion on this agenda item?
I would move to, with the contingencies in place, approve the preliminary plat for the Auburn Trail at 4605 and 4514 Hyde Avenue.
Can I note that that is reflected as alternative 1 in the staff report?
Alternative 1, thank you.
Great.
Okay, so we have a motion for alternative 1 as written, as described in the agenda packet. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of recommending alternative 1, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
So this item will, just for the audience's benefit, this item will move forward to the city council. I think it's tentatively scheduled for April 28th. I'm looking at Amelia. So it will be considered again at the city council level on the 28th.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we'll move on to commission comments. Does anyone on the commission have any comments? And I should just clarify, so for new people, just an opportunity to provide, if commissioners have any general comments or any things they would like to mention on the record here as part of that, this is the opportunity to do so.
Who is our 7th member now?
It's still
Julie Winter is still on the commission. She's just not here today. Yep.
I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, good
So
question.
Two new members, 5 of you are still
Yep.
ongoing members. So.
All right. Seeing no commission comments other than that, Ellie, are there any staff comments?
Yeah, I just have a couple for your information. Just a reminder, at our next meeting in May is annual review of bylaws. If you've been really had that burning issue about our bylaws, next meeting will be a time to bring that up.
Do those, remind me, do those get sent out
We
for that?
we do send out a
Okay,
copy so
great.
you can review them.
Yep.
And then what I do want to touch upon that's probably a little more important is last night City Council talked about the planning division work plan. So we have a number of ongoing projects. I think we talked about some of these development incentive projects that are coming forward. Auburn Trail is one of them. We have 4 other ones that are working their way through the system. So we do expect in the next 2 to 3 months a fair number of subdivision and rezoning projects that are kind of ongoing that we've been aware of since January. But looking forward to starting this summer, the city council always kind of prioritizes bigger picture projects that are not development driven necessarily. So if you ask for a subdivision or rezoning, that's something you apply for. You don't go ask permission for council to do that. You go through the process. So a couple of other projects are kind of bigger picture things. The one that we have talked about previously that did not yet start is the rewrite of zoning and subdivision codes into a unified development code. That was intended to begin last fall. It was pushed because of other council priorities, namely the development incentives discussion took up most of the winter. So council was at this point last night to start to talk about some of these other items that are coming forward. So they did make a motion to, I want to note one other thing. We did receive a grant to do a planning and feasibility study for a multimodal parking structure downtown. So that's something that we will probably start in the fall with the Public Works Department. And that was really priority number 1 for council since we got federal funding to do the grant. That's something that rose to the top as the next priority. But as we looked at some other things that are out there, City Council determined that they wanted to consider a request that's going to involve potentially some zoning changes just to the north of 6th Street in relation to downtown development options. So that was tentatively moved forward to discuss as something. So that's a project. If they were changing zoning standards, that comes into the review of the city of the P&Z. So just to alert you that is a priority. The Unified Development Code still was maintained as a priority project. I just don't think it's going to begin in earnest in any way, probably until after the summer. We need more information about the parking study. We don't have formal notice to proceed, and our agreements aren't done with the US DOT, so we don't have a full handle on what the schedule is for that. But so I think this summer you're going to still see the same development projects. You're probably going to see a proposal related some opportunities for downtown housing related to properties north of 6th Street, and then some other ongoing things. The Link project is considered one of those ongoing development projects too that we still believe you'll see as a proposal here, hopefully this summer from a site plan. So if you're interested in some of the discussion elements, they're all in a council action forum on the agenda last night. There was a few smaller text amendments that we'll sprinkle in that just are considered more cleanup items. The legislature passed some tweaks to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, so we're going to do a couple small tweaks to that. It'll be the third time in 3 years, so that's always fun. And then the other minor thing that we need to address is the data centers, which a lot of people talk about across the country, and it's come up here. We don't really use the term in the zoning ordinance, so we just want to add a definition of what a data center is and make it clear where that can be in the city and what that is. So we're not trying to create a whole bunch of standards, but it's just a little ambiguous of what that is. So council said, go ahead, do a couple of these minor little text amendments. These bigger picture things we're going to program out into the summer and the fall. And I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on some things that will be coming.
Great. Thank you. All right. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.